One thing that I've got in my bag I wanted to show you is this formation. It's just two pieces of glass that has white and black sands in it. And it gives kind of an idea of how, by the hydraulic action, the sands separate out according to their density.
That is not hydraulic action. Hydraulic action is the erosive force of water. When a river carves a canyon, when a river erodes a canyon, that is hydraulic action. When water breaks down a rock into smaller pieces, that is hydraulic action. The sorting of particles by densities is called a graded bedding. But it's okay, I'm not expecting someone like yourself to understand these terms.
By just action of the water. Just a simple example of how those different layers were formed.
But you see, that's not how the multiple layers are formed. That's how one layer is formed, and that's a graded bedding. I have a graded bedding right here. Here. This is a jar of water and dirt. When you shake it up, just like you're saying, the particles will sort themselves into higher densities at the bottom, lower densities on top. Let's set this down for a second. What do we see in the geologic column? We see multiple layers. We see things like this. This is what we see. Each one of these layers is its own graded bedding. Now let's look at this again. How many layers do we have? One. The heavy particles at the bottom and the light particles on top, those are not separate layers, because if that were the case, on the surface of the earth we would only find fine silt, fine grains, and we would never find heavy rocks. But we do. Why is that? Do you see the difference? One layer, like the example that you gave in your own presentation, finer grains on top, heavy grains at the bottom. And multiple layers. Now you may be wondering, how did I get these multiple layers?
You put a little dirt inside, you add some water and let it dry, and watch that layer form right there before you. And then you add some dirt again, and then you add some water next. You let it dry, and now you have 2 layers. You repeat that, you repeat that, you repeat that, you repeat that.
You get these multiple layers the same way the Earth got the multiple layers. One layer at a time. And that's the cool thing about science, because you can actually test, repeat, and observe these things. And I tested your exact experiment, and the results were not what we see in the real world. The Earth has multiple layers, not one. If you're saying the global flood caused all those layers, you simply don't understand geology, or flood mechanics, or how layers are formed. But because of the scientific method, I tested your experiments. I repeated each layer multiple times. And I observed the differences between the two. I observed the differences between the one that you presented and the one that I made. Mine is much more realistic and much more close to what we observe in the real world. One flood will cause one layer. The layers of the earth were formed one at a time, not all at once. And all of the strata of the earth is not a huge graded bedding. And that's how a chemist gets schooled by a kid in an introductory geology class.
The rain began to fall. It's still pitch black. The sea level has climbed another 4,000 feet or so, and just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, the fountains of the deep break open. Talk about complete, utter chaos. At this point, the continents are flying around at 45 miles an hour, causing massive seismic disturbances on the ocean floor, which create tsunamis at the ocean surface, which the sea level probably is about 6,000 feet right now. but it's a golly gosh darn good thing that the Ark is made of gopher wood, because the Ark is definitely tumbling around like a corkscrew, and this kind of treatment would bust apart any other Ark made of any other kind of wood. And that's not even mentioning the enormous amount of heat being released, with something of the force of 10 billion hydrogen bombs are going off along the mid-ocean ridges all around the world. This would raise the average global temperature a few hundred degrees or so, just to make things a little bit more interesting. A few days later, the continents slow down. The tsunamis calm down, the sky clears up for the first time since creation, and Noah's Ark, made of gopher wood, survived the torment and lived happily ever after. After, of course, the water mysteriously disappears. It would have to be that order, because if the hydroplate deal happened first, the mountains would be higher and would cause more work for the water canopy theory, ultimately leaving more water to magically disappear away, and the laws of magic forbid any more than 10,000 feet of water to disappear at one time. Right, so do you see why we really can't take these theories seriously, even if they work together? Regardless of which way you cut it, it just works out to an impossibility. Furthermore, with all of this going on, it leaves absolutely no trace. No global unified single layer with